Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Jasmine McCoy. This video is going to be about my thoughts as a adult woman eligible to vote on the documentary by A24 called Boys State. If you are like me, then the first time you saw that A24 was putting out another movie, you were like, oh yes, another horror movie. So I watched the trailer thinking that it was horror because typically when I think of A24, I think of Hereditary, Midsommar, The Green Room. And I'm waiting for the trailer to take on a darker, grittier tone, maybe for the music to change, and that never happened. So at the end of watching the trailer for the first time, I was very confused. Like, it's actually about boys in Texas creating their own state governance. Oh, okay, now that I know that, let me watch the trailer again. So I understood what was happening a little bit more the second time. On another note, Tuesday I voted in my first presidential election. My mother and I put on our AKA's Vote sweatshirts, we drove to the Board of Elections, and we turned in our absentee ballots. So that was really fun. It made me feel good knowing that I've done my civic duty 2 weeks ahead of when all the polling and stuff happens on election day. So that was really nice. On another note, I also participated in a panel about the importance of voting. And I was invited to talk about the importance of young voters voting, first-time people who are 18 to 21 years old like myself. So I'm 21, I missed participating in last election by about 3 months. And that was really nice because I got to talk about why it's important for people like us to register, participate, and make our voices heard, because this is our future that we're voting about. And at our ages, we've got like 10, 15, however many presidential elections left. Why not just start now and make sure that you have a consistent track record? If you care about your future, you'll vote. Anyway, the recording of that panel is in the description below. With that, I'm going to start talking about Boys State. So how does Boys State work? If you're like me, you didn't know that it existed. So these Texas high school seniors, they come in and they get separated into two groups, the Federalists and the Nationalists. Just because you are a Federalist does not mean that you have to have the actual platform that Federalists would have held 200 years ago. Your party gets to create your platform. It's just that they needed to call the group something and they couldn't use Democrat and Republican because those are used now. Anyway, there are 4 main boys that we are going to be focused on. Stephen, Robert, and Renee are all Nationalists, and Ben is the only Federalist. There's a lot happens. So at Boys State, they're supposed to create their own governance. They are supposed to create laws and just govern themselves. They have free reign to do whatever they want. The year before, they decided to secede. You can do anything. Since this is Boys State, the highest position that a party can aspire to hold is that of the governor. So that's the big kahuna, that's what they're all gunning for, that's what the party is reaching for. Stephen, he is a Latino, and he started off the documentary getting dropped off at the charter bus that takes them to where they'll be staying by himself. Stephen is a very soft-spoken, self-assured boy. He knows who he is, he knows what his morals are, and he knows the type of politician he wants to be, which is someone who reaches out to the people. And then there is Robert. In my notes that I took, I said that Robert is very charismatic, very bro-y also, and he came in knowing he wanted to be governor. Stephen also decided that he wanted to run for governor as well. They're part of the same party though. So Robert is the kind of person who just seems very likable. Like you just want to, they can't do this because they're boys. The kind of guy you want to share a beer with is how I would describe him as a personality. So Both of them are trying to be governor. But there is another position that is also very important, and that is the position of state coordinator, which is what Renee wins. Renee, when he started speaking, I was like, why don't you want to run for governor? Because he knows how to speak. He was clear, concise, no ums. And he wins state coordinator, obviously. The state coordinator is almost like a parliamentarian, rule knower kind of person that keeps the entire party on track and makes sure that they are meeting their goals. In order to even be considered, you have to get 30 votes. So Robert has no problem getting his 30 votes. Stephen, on the other hand, he's struggling at the last hour. He has to go to the news team, which is working late that night, give them his pitch, and get his last 30th vote. And when he does, again, extremely proud of him because he's doing his best. Now, looking at the Federalist, Ben. Ben is someone who is extremely dedicated and loves the United States. And that is something beautiful to see, especially as like a young man. He understands the importance of hard work. And he has a very personal story. He lost both of his legs below the knee due to meningitis, but that did not stop any of his dreams. Though he did want to become a member of the armed forces, he adapted his dream. He now wants to be either a part of the CIA or the FBI. He is the kind of person where it makes me think of the meme, adapt, improvise, overcome, because that's exactly what he did. He started out wanting to be governor, but he was experiencing some problems getting his 30 signatures, and instead he decided that he would go for state coordinator. Stephen and Robert, they both want to be the gubernatorial candidate for the Nationalist Party. That can't happen. We can't have two. They have a runoff among other candidates that they don't bother to tell us anything about. Robert ends up realizing that, and this is something that I feel is very mature of him, that he realized he was not the better candidate, and instead of continuing with his run, he decided to step back and endorse Stephen. So Stephen becomes the gubernatorial candidate for the Nationalist Party. Remember how I said that the previous year of Boys State, they seceded? Well, this year, someone decides they want to start that process by saying that they move that the party accepts secession as one of their platform ideals. And Renee vetoes that. He says, we're not doing that. So he gets booed, and that is something that stays with him for the entire rest of the time of Boys State. Stephen wins the gubernatorial candidate position for the Nationalist Party. That's great. But Renee is not able to get rid of the fact that people want to impeach him. And they want to impeach him so much that they create a Impeach Renee Instagram page, and on this page they put some racist memes about him. But Renee is very strong-willed, assured of himself. He's like, okay, fine, do it then. The page ends up getting taken down. He keeps his position as state coordinator. He's not going to let himself be run out of this position, and we like that. We like confidence. The Federalist Party sees the little chaos that's happening on the national side, so they start exploiting that. Stephen represents the Nationalists. A boy named Eddie, who we don't know anything about Eddie, ends up being the candidate for the Federalist Party. Renee is the state coordinator for the Nationalist Party, and Ben is the state coordinator for the Federalist Party. They are in the campaign. They are giving their campaign speeches to the districts, which are really just rooms of different groups of boys. And at one point, Eddie is giving his speech, and he had 5 minutes to speak. He only spoke for 2, so he says, I would now like to open it up for question and answer with the Nationalist district members, because he wasn't in his own district. And Renee gets up and says, we're not going to allow you to have a Q&A. That's not a part of what you're allowed to do at this district meeting. And Ben comes in as state coordinator of the Federalist Party and says, "You are trying to silence my candidate. You're trying to sabotage the Federalist Party." And then that gets out. That adds more fuel to the fire for impeaching Renee. And Stephen is just a pure cinnamon roll throughout all of this. He stays out of all the drama, but he's also the kind of person that will come up to Renee, tell him that he's a great state coordinator, and also publicly to the Nationals, to the Federalists, will also say that Renee is a fantastic state coordinator, that he knows his stuff, that he is a honest and loyal friend, and that he is generally just a good person. So that's how Stephen is trying to help Renee. And Renee is trying to help Stephen because he's the state coordinator. But throughout all of this, Stephen has been a very just relatable candidate because during, for instance, their lunch breaks, he'll be in the cafeteria talking to Federalists and Nationalists about what it is that they want out of their state. And I love that about him because he's not someone who is going to fling mud during a campaign, which is what it felt like Ben was doing by saying, the Nationalists and Renee are trying to sabotage the Federalist Party. So that ends up getting out. And in the very end, Eddie ends up winning. And that just broke my heart because I saw how much the directors wanted me to see of Stephen doing his very best, of Renee dealing with people of his own party trying to impeach him, people of his own party being racist toward him, and trying to do what's best for the party. It was very sad seeing Stephen lose, seeing Renee feel like what was happening to him ended up brushing off onto Stephen and taking down his campaign. So Renee was feeling guilty then. And Robert was also feeling, because I haven't talked about Robert in a bit, Robert was feeling a little bit sad because he felt so deeply that Stephen was the better candidate and that he deserved it so much. Whereas Ben, on the other hand, is, and I'll get to some quotes in the next section, but Ben is like, yes, I did it, my candidate won. He was happy that Eddie won. And here we are not knowing anything about Eddie, except that he also is a soft-spoken, shy candidate. People described him as a young Ben Shapiro, and he's all statistics and facts. So let me get into the quotes now of things that I feel need to be acknowledged, recognized, and analyzed a little bit. Renee, when he was talking about his position as the state coordinator, he said that if we want to win, we need to keep the party palatable to all to beat the Federalists. We need to stay in the middle. Nice, good, I like that. If you want to win, you're not just going to be the leader of your party. You're not just going to be the governor of your party. You're going to be the governor of the entire boy state of Texas. Nice. Okay, there was also a point where they are in the actual state house and they are bringing forward the legislation that they want to propose. And they are bringing forward stupid things like a law that bans putting pineapple on pizza, a law that bans wearing Crocs except for every Tuesday and Thursday. It's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And someone comes up and says, is this what we're really going to do? We can't waste time passing stupid legislation. And he even gets booed. And it's like, what are you all doing? Why are you booing people because they're right? And because they're trying to keep the union together, or they're trying to keep and respect people's time? Why are they booing? Anyway, Ben says, that's what happens when you get 17-year-old boys in a room. They're not mature. And that's something that I had to sit back and be like, well, yeah, it's boys' state. Seeing Ben have that kind of attitude was like, yeah, you all are proving that you all aren't mature enough to be politicians at your age, which is perfectly fine. That's why we don't let 17-year-old boys be politicians and make policy decisions. Ben, at one point in his speech for state coordinator, says we need to dominate. And now I'm going to get into the language that was used when they are trying to gain their positions as state coordinator or the gubernatorial candidate for their party. So Ben, he says we need to dominate. Robert, his friend, not Robert himself, but one of his friends says it's going to get vulgar eventually. That's how you get 17 and 16-year-old boys' attention. Renee says, despite our perceived differences, there's Federalists to beat. This is a point where I was recognizing that as young men, they are going to talk about winning as a form of dominance. And at one point, someone also said something about we need to make the Federalists submit. And hearing that, it's like, not really the kind of language I personally would want to hear from a candidate. Back when Robert still wanted to be the gubernatorial candidate, he said, I'm pro-life and not ashamed, and we must keep the right to bear arms. He said that in front of the entire nationalist contingency. But later, when he's alone with the directors or producers, whoever, he says, those political views in the speech were not my own. I'm playing this like a game. My stance on abortion wouldn't stand out there in front of all of those conservatives. So I chose a new one. That's politics, I think. I'm pro-choice. Sometimes you can't win on what you believe in your heart, but you can't win on minority opinions. I don't want to add to that, but getting here gave me a new appreciation for why politicians lie to get into office. And that is something where I wrote word for word what Robert said. He told them he was pro-life. He's not pro-life, he's pro-choice. And he says, I have a new appreciation for why politicians lie. This is not the way that we want our young men to perceive politicians as liars. That's not what we want. We don't want to be teaching our young people that in order to be a politician, you must lie. You must be good at lying. You must lie to appease the masses. And in this case, the masses were perceived as being conservatives. So that's something that didn't sit well with me. And it's really sad that we have him thinking this way about our government. Stephen's favorite historical figure was Napoleon, and he said he wanted his confidence and his ambition. That's what I would like to be. And I'm sitting here like, oh my God, he's stepping out of his comfort zone. Yes, Stephen, you're doing great. Renee says he was okay with demagoguing an entire crowd against a person, not a party, a person. And I was hurt, and I have that underlined. I was hurt because I appreciated hearing from Renee this confession of emotion, that he was hurt, because typically you don't hear men, they are told to suppress their emotions. And here I am looking at this, hearing this, and thinking, oh, this is something he really cared about. He's being betrayed by someone who he felt was going to hold an honorable race. He felt that. And here I am, like, being able to admit your emotions is something that we should see more of from men, and especially seeing him do it at this young age of 17. It makes me feel good knowing that, at least for him, his emotions aren't being suppressed by society. So that was something I appreciated. Ben, let's hear what Ben has to say. He says, a message of unity, as good as it sounds, and as good as it ultimately is for our country, isn't winning any elections. You have to use personal attacks to find divisive issues to differentiate. Here I am going, ooh, that is not the way that we want young boys to see politics. We don't want them to see this as a smear game or a mudslinging game. We don't want them to see politics as that. But here he is saying, like, as good as unity is, it doesn't win. what? So you would rather win based on being divided? Even though one of the entire things about being the United States of America is that, like, we are united. It's literally in our name. And here he is saying that, like, being divisive is how you win. And it's like, no, that is not the way that we want to be seen. That's not the way that we should be teaching our children, our young men who are one day going to vote, who might one day be politicians, considering that they were in Boys State. This is not the way that we want them to see politics. Another thing that Ben says is that perceived bias is a very powerful issue, especially to conservatives. That is something Trump did very well, saying the system is rigged against us and working to keep us down. I have no regrets about my decisions on a moral or political level. The fact that he has to say I have no regrets means that he knows his actions were questionable. You don't not make unquestionable actions and feel like you have something to be regretful about. Anyway, he said that, and I was just disappointed in Ben by the end of the at the end of the documentary. I was very disappointed because of the way that he conducted himself. He knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing was wrong, but it achieved his end goal of the Federalists winning. Renee says he had so much to prove and lost it all. Maybe if I had debased them, we could have won. I think he's a fantastic politician, talking about Ben. But I don't think a fantastic politician is a compliment either. And one, nice comeback. We see it. But at the same time, you would want for a politician to be a good thing, considering that a politician is someone who serves the people. There were a lot of things. At the end, they told us where everyone was, how they were doing, what schools they got into, what big events that they were talking at. And now I'm going to talk about my little critiques of the documentary. Sorry, we're moving a little bit because the sun is moving in, but my big critique was, why didn't they tell us anything about Eddie? Like, they told us nothing about Eddie, and he ends up winning to be the governor of Boys State within this year. By not knowing anything about him, it instantly made at least me hate him and be mad at him for stealing the position away from Stephen. That's how I saw it. It would have been nice to at least hear his side of the story. That way you could understand the election that was happening, because all we heard was from Stephen, what he was doing as the gubernatorial candidate for the Nationalists, and you don't hear anything about the Federalist platform. Like, the Federalist platform was, look, the Nationalists don't know what they're doing. They want to impeach their state coordinator. They want to sabotage us and not allow us to speak. That was what we knew about the Federalist. So that was my first main critique. My other critique is, where is Girls State? How does that go? It would have been fantastic if they released a boys' state and a girls' state at the same time. That way you could compare how boys and girls see politics. I would like to be able to know how girls see politics, see if it is any smoother, if it's any rougher. Do the girls have better communication skills, saying what it is that they want the platform to be, or do they get very catty and like pull back when what they want doesn't happen? Like, that's something that I would have been able to see. And those were my only two critiques of this documentary. I wanted to know more about Eddie and where is Girls State. And that's all I got to say. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in a later video. Bye.